Forget all the usual missing person stories you've ever heard, because what I'm about to share with you will seriously mess with how you think about the Alaskan wilderness. These aren't just strange. They're the kind of stories that make you double-check the shadows, the kind that linger long after the video ends. Alaska has always been a frontier, a land where dreams of fortune were chased through snow and stone, where abandoned gold mines still sit like scars in the earth. But there's a darker layer to this wilderness, one that locals rarely speak of aloud. Men have walked into these old mines, drawn by curiosity or desperation, and never walked out again. The families left behind search the trails, retrace the steps, and ask the same aching question: what happened out there? Tonight, we follow the story of one such man whose disappearance near an abandoned mine has haunted the state for years. A story that begins simply with a routine hiking trip, but ends in silence and an emptiness no one can explain. It was early September, the kind of Alaskan fall where daylight lingers but the air sharpens, warning of winter's approach. Michael Harris, 52 years old, a retired electrician from Anchorage, decided to take one last camping trip before the snow closed in. He wasn't reckless. He had decades of experience outdoors, always kept his pack stocked with maps, flare, and a rifle for bear country. Friends described him as practical, deliberate, the kind of man who double-knotted his boots even if he was just crossing the street. So when he told his brother, he planned to spend 3 days near the Keno Hill Mine, an abandoned site 2 hours north of Fairbanks, no one worried. Michael had been there before, fascinated by the remnants of the gold rush. Rusted machinery half swallowed by moss, collapsed shafts whispering of another era. He loved the silence, he said. Loved how the place made you feel both insignificant and alive. And so, on a clear Saturday morning, he drove north and disappeared into the trees. 2 days later, a storm rolled in. It wasn't unusual for that region's sudden walls of rain that turned trails into rivers, fog so thick you could lose your bearings 10 feet from camp. Michael's brother tried calling his satellite phone, but got nothing. At first, he thought maybe the weather had knocked the signal, but when Michael didn't return on Monday evening, he contacted Alaska State Troopers. A search began the next morning, teams of volunteers and dogs pushing through the soaked forest, following the path toward the old mine. What they found was unsettling. Michael's truck parked neatly at the trailhead, his gear missing from the back seat, and tracks leading into the woods. But those tracks, they simply stopped. No scuffle, no drag marks, no signs of panic. It was as if he had stepped into the trees and melted into the landscape. The only clue came from a hunter who claimed he'd seen a figure near the mine entrance the day before, standing perfectly still, as if listening for something underground. The mine itself was dangerous, collapsed in several places, its mouth yawning open like the remains of a broken jaw. Searchers were cautious, some refusing to step too close. They say the ground there shifts without warning, that the air inside burns cold, metallic. When the dogs were led to the entrance, they whined, circled, and pulled away as if refusing to go further. Troopers lowered cameras and lights into the main shaft, but all they found were jagged walls and flooded tunnels, no sign of human presence. Michael's brother, standing at the edge, swore he could hear something below the drip of water, like a faint echo or a voice calling back from deep inside. Of course, fatigue and grief can play cruel tricks on the mind. But he wasn't alone. 2 other volunteers admitted they felt watched near the mine, though no one else was in sight. The search stretched for 10 days, combing ridges, rivers, and creeks. Nothing. Not a jacket, not a scrap of fabric, not even a print in the mud. This is where the story shifts from ordinary tragedy into something more haunting. Michael wasn't the first to vanish near Keno Hill. In 1987, 2 young prospectors had gone missing in almost the same location. They'd been looking for quartz veins rumored to hold leftover gold. Their camp was found intact, firewood stacked, gear in place, but the men were gone. A journal one of them kept was recovered, its last entry unfinished. Heard the wind again tonight. No, not wind. Closer. That entry, paired with Michael's disappearance, reopened a file long forgotten. Locals began whispering about the mine being cursed, though they said it with that Alaskan bluntness, half belief, half resignation. A wilderness this vast doesn't need curses to swallow people whole. And yet, the pattern was difficult to ignore. Same area, same trails, same eerie lack of evidence. As one search volunteer put it, out here, when someone's gone, you usually find something. A torn boot, a rifle, a body. But here, nothing. The theories came quickly, as they always do. Some said Michael must have fallen into an unmarked shaft, his body hidden by flooding. Others believed he'd wandered off trail in the storm and met a bear, though no signs of blood or struggle supported that. A few leaned toward foul play, that maybe drifters or opportunists had crossed his path, men who knew the woods well enough to hide their tracks. But then there were the stranger ideas, the ones no one voiced too loudly, that the mine itself lured men inside, that something beneath the earth, something older than the gold rush, pulled at them. One old-timer recalled hearing stories from native hunters, warnings to avoid that hill, claiming the ground there was hollow and restless. Whether legend or not, the fear was real. Even hardened searchers refused to camp near the mine, setting their tents a mile away. At night, they claimed, the forest grew too quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Michael's family never stopped looking. His brother returned every summer, walking the same trails, calling his name into the valleys. He even hired private divers to explore flooded shafts, but the passages twisted too deep, too narrow. At one point, a camera feed went dark mid-descent, though the divers swore they hadn't touched it. When the footage was reviewed, the last frame showed something odd ripples in the water, as if disturbed by movement just out of sight. The divers dismissed it as equipment malfunction, but the family wasn't so sure. The grief hardened into something else, an obsession. They gathered every disappearance from the region, pinning them on a map. What they found was chilling. 5 cases within a 10-mile radius of abandoned mines, spanning over a century. Different decades, different circumstances, yet always the same silence at the end. It was a pattern that could no longer be ignored. But here's where it unsettles even further. A year after Michael vanished, a hiker named Andrea Cooper was reported missing not far from the same mine. She was 34, a photographer from Oregon, visiting to capture autumn landscapes. When authorities searched for her, they discovered her camera bag hanging on a branch. Inside were dozens of photos. Most were of ridges, rivers, and tundra, but the last 5, they were darker, grainy, shot near dusk. The frames showed the entrance of the mine, each one closer than the last, as if she'd been walking toward it. The final picture blurred badly, her hand slipping, but something faint glowed in the corner. A reflection? A figure? No one could say for sure. Andrea's body was never found. Her disappearance, coupled with Michael's, reignited talk that something about those mines wasn't just dangerous, it was predatory. So what are we left with? On one hand, logic insists that Alaska's wilderness is explanation enough. People vanish there every year, consumed by weather, wildlife, and distance. Rescue teams know that reality well. But on the other hand, why here? In this same forgotten corner, near these old mines, do people vanish without a single clue? No torn fabric, no dropped gear. Just silence, as if the land itself closed over them. Perhaps it's coincidence, or perhaps there are answers buried beneath the rock, waiting in tunnels too dangerous to explore. Whatever the truth, the mine at Kino Hill stands as a reminder that some mysteries do not fade with time. Families still wait, still wonder. And the wilderness? It waits too, silent, patient, holding on to secrets only it will ever know. Snow crunched under heavy boots as the search team fanned out across the narrow valley. Their radios crackled, voices clipped, breath visible in the freezing air. At the center of it all was an old, half-collapsed entrance to the El Dorado mine, its wooden beams blackened by decades of rot, leaning like brittle ribs against the mountain wall. Floodlights cut through the early dusk, revealing a scattering of tracks, some from the team, others belonging to the man they were searching for. David Ellison, a park ranger, had been missing for 36 hours. His snowmobile was found a mile back, idling until it ran out of fuel, gear strapped to the sled, but rifle gone. A few prints led straight toward the mine, and then simply vanished. No drag marks. No scuffle. Just ended. That silence pressed against the team, heavy and unspoken. Even the dogs hesitated, circling but refusing to go near the black mouth of the shaft. Something about that opening seemed to breathe, exhaling cold air into the night. David hadn't been just another hiker lost to Alaska's wilderness. He knew these valleys better than most men alive. He'd worked the area for years, guiding rescue operations, teaching survival classes, helping stranded travelers. He was disciplined, precise, and cautious. Which is why, when his wife reported him missing after he failed to check in, no one thought he'd simply gotten lost. He had been tracking reports of illegal trapping near the old mine routine work for a ranger, but the site itself carried weight. Locals often warned newcomers not to linger near El Dorado. Too many odd stories. Strange echoes in the tunnels. Hunters who swore they heard voices at night, sometimes even their names carried back to them in the wind. David had laughed at the stories, but he still mentioned them once in a while, half serious. Some places don't forget what happened, he told his son once. They hold on to it. That was the last advice his family would ever hear from him. The official report was methodical, as if writing the right words could explain away the unease. Searchers found no sign of forced entry into the mine. No dropped pack, no torn clothing, no blood, nothing to suggest a struggle. Yet one small detail caught investigators off guard. David's radio, clipped to his vest when he left home, was discovered lying neatly on a rock ledge near the mine entrance. Still functional, battery full, as if someone or something had set it down deliberately. His wife insisted he never removed his radio. It was a rule he lived by. The decision unsettled the team, a breach of his own discipline that didn't make sense. One trooper later admitted, off the record, that when he picked it up, he felt it was still faintly warm, though no one else confirmed that detail. What they all agreed on, however, was that the valley grew unnervingly still after nightfall, the silence broken only by the dripping of water deep within the tunnels. Theories rose quickly, and none of them sat comfortably. Some argued David had fallen into an unmarked shaft, swallowed by the unstable ground. Others suggested foul play, that maybe he had interrupted a group of trappers or squatters who silenced him and concealed the evidence. But then there were the less tangible explanations. Several searchers swore they heard footsteps during the Operation Echoes on the ridge, crunching snow just out of sight. Each time, they split into pairs, sweeping the area, only to find nothing. Dogs bristled, whining at shadows, refusing to go further. One handler recalled how his shepherd pressed its body flat against the snow, tail tucked, staring at the mine with wide, glassy eyes. He said it reminded him of animals sensing earthquakes before they happen aware of something their human handlers could not perceive. By the 10th day, the official search was called off. David's family begged for more time, but the wilderness was merciless, the weather turning. The case was filed as unresolved. What made it worse was the history. El Dorado Mine had its share of vanishings long before David's case. In 1913, 3 prospectors set up camp near the ridge. Their tools and food were discovered neatly arranged weeks later, but the men were gone. In the 1960s, a surveyor disappeared while mapping mineral veins nearby. His theodolite was found intact on the slope, tripod firmly planted, but his notes ended mid-sentence. Strange hum again. Like, the page trailed off, pen still pressed into paper. No body was ever found. And now David, the ranger who had walked those trails more times than anyone. The pattern unsettled even skeptics. How many accidents could occur in the same shadowed corner of the Alaskan wilderness without leaving a trace? El Dorado's tunnels had been blasted open and abandoned, but they seemed to draw people in and keep them there. The more the families compared stories, the more a chilling thought began to form. Maybe the mine wasn't just a place where men disappeared. Maybe it was the reason they did. David's wife refused to let it end there. She gathered volunteers, retired rangers, local hunters, even 2 prospectors who still lingered in the region, and led private searches each summer. They combed the ridges with metal detectors, rappelled into partially collapsed shafts, and mapped every narrow canyon. But the mine itself remained too unstable to explore fully. Each attempt ended with equipment failure, collapsing rock, or sudden floods that forced them back. One diver, hired to investigate a water-filled shaft, returned pale and shaken. He claimed he'd seen light flickering beneath the surface, too deep for his lamp, moving against the current. He refused to dive again, wouldn't even talk about it afterward. Others reported hearing whispers, faint but clear, bouncing off stone walls where no one else was standing. By the 3rd year, several volunteers stopped returning. The mountain had a way of pressing its weight on you, they said. A way of making you feel small, watched, and unwanted. Still, the family pressed on. They compiled missing persons cases within a 100-mile radius, charting them on a map. What emerged was disturbing. Clusters around abandoned mines, not just El Dorado, but others left behind from the gold rush. Places where records blurred, where rumors replaced facts. The wilderness was full of danger. Yes, but why always near these tunnels? Some whispered of gas pockets, hallucinations, hidden shafts. Others muttered about things older than the mines themselves. Folklore from indigenous groups spoke of hollow mountains, spirits that lured the greedy and the curious into the dark. David had read those stories too. In fact, his wife found a note in his study, scribbled weeks before he vanished. El Dorado not just empty. Feels like it listens. She never knew if it was research or something he felt himself. Years later, the mystery remains unsolved. No bones, no pack, no rifle, not even a boot sole to confirm David Ellison's final steps. Just an absence, vast and unrelenting, like the mountain itself swallowed him whole. His son, now grown, hikes the valley each year on the anniversary, leaving a lantern by the mine entrance. So if he's down there, he says, he's not in the dark. And each year, locals shake their heads, unwilling to linger too long. Because in Alaska, the land doesn't give back what it takes. It holds on to its secrets, deep in the tunnels of places like El Dorado, where even the echoes sound like voices that don't belong. My grandfather used to tell me about the night he camped near an abandoned mine outside Nome. He wasn't a man prone to exaggeration, stoic, weathered, the kind of Alaskan who measured words carefully. But whenever that story came up, his voice would drop and his eyes would go distant. He said the mine had a strange quiet to it, a silence that pressed against the ears until even your own breath felt too loud. Don't sleep near places like that, he warned. The ground remembers more than you want to know. I used to dismiss it as old man talk, but when I was older, I learned the story wasn't just his. Others spoke of the same mine, the same silence, and the same unexplainable disappearances. And one of those stories, the disappearance of a prospector named Henry Lawson, still unsettles me more than any campfire tale. Because in Henry's case, We have his journal, his last words, scribbled in shaky handwriting that stops mid-sentence. Henry wasn't young when he came north. He was 53, grizzled, with hands rough from years of carpentry in Oregon. But when the economy soured, he chased the same dream many before him had chased gold in Alaska. He arrived in Nome in the late 1990s, long after the original rush had faded, but still hopeful he could carve out a fortune in the forgotten corners. Locals thought him odd, but harmless. He'd spend hours in the archives, poring over maps of abandoned claims, circling areas most men avoided. Eventually, he fixated on the Bonanza Shaft, a collapsed mine 30 miles inland, tucked in a valley scarred with tailings and rusted equipment. Too unstable, everyone told him. Not worth the risk, but Henry was stubborn. He believed the miners had left behind veins no one had reached. In June of 1998, he set out alone, hauling supplies on a sled, waving off warnings with a lopsided grin. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. Weeks later, when he didn't return, locals organized a search. What they found chilled them. Henry's camp was still standing, a tarp strung between spruce trees, firewood stacked neatly. His pot hung blackened over a cold fire. His sled sat nearby, still half loaded with supplies. Nothing appeared disturbed, except for his journal, lying open on a crate, pages curling from rain. The last entries were frantic, words scratched in uneven lines. At first, he wrote of the mine itself, how he felt drawn to it, how the air inside seemed to hum faintly, vibrating through the stone. He described hearing dripping where no water should be, and footsteps that echoed even when he was still. Then the entries grew stranger. He claimed he saw light deep in the shaft, not lantern light, but a pale glow that flickered and moved as if alive. His final entry ended abruptly. If it comes again tonight, I'll follow. I have to know. The line cut there, pen streaking off the page. Searchers pushed toward the shaft, wary of collapses. They found drag marks where something or someone had shifted rocks near the entrance. Inside, the air was sour, damp, heavy with mold. They advanced only 30 feet before the ground crumbled underfoot, forcing them to retreat. The shaft was declared too unstable to continue. But one man, a prospector himself, swore he saw footprints leading deeper in before the collapse prints that stopped suddenly, mid-stride, as though the person had vanished into the wall. No one could prove it. No body was found. After 3 days, the search was abandoned. Officially, Henry was declared missing, presumed dead, likely buried in a collapse. Unofficially, locals whispered his journal told a different story. Some swore the mine had claimed him, the way it had claimed others before, because Henry was not the first, nor would he be the last. Years later, hikers reported odd discoveries in that valley. A rusted pan with initials scratched on the bottom H.L. found, on a ridge no one believed Henry reached. A torn scrap of fabric, wedged in rock near the creek, weathered but oddly preserved. One group even claimed to hear tapping from beneath the ground at night, faint and rhythmic, as if someone was still working the mine from below. Each story fanned the legend further, turning Henry Lawson into a ghost tale. But his family never saw it that way. They wanted answers. His daughter traveled to Nome in 2005, hiring private cavers to re-enter the shaft. The team descended cautiously, reinforcing beams, marking passages. 90 feet in, they found something unexpected. A section of wall smeared with charcoal drawings, crude but clear, shapes of tunnels, circles like eyes. And beneath it, one word scrawled repeatedly, "Listen." The charcoal crumbled at the touch. They searched further, but another collapse forced them out. The mine was sealed after that, deemed permanently inaccessible. Still, questions lingered. If Henry died in a collapse, why no remains? Why the drawings, the journal entries about footsteps and light? His daughter insisted her father wasn't delusional. He'd been steady, pragmatic, not prone to fantasies. Experts countered that isolation, poor air quality, and stress could induce hallucinations. That was the simple answer. But locals weren't satisfied. They remembered other disappearances near old mines, other journals cut short, other voices echoing where no one should be. Over time, Henry's story merged with theirs, another thread in Alaska's web of vanishings. Campfire tailies carried his name, always with the same warning: don't go near Bonanza Shaft after dark. Some claimed they'd seen a lantern glow there still, moving slowly along the valley floor, though the mine was sealed tight. Others said if you called Henry's name at night, you might hear scratching in reply. His family stopped visiting after a decade, unable to bear the weight of hope and silence. But the mine remains, silent, watching, and maybe that's the hardest part, to accept that silence. In a state so vast, where the wilderness can erase a man in minutes, you'd think we'd get used to it. But certain places gnaw at us, refusing to be explained away. Henry's disappearance is one of them. His journal sits in a case now at the Nome Museum. Pages yellowed, but words still sharp, still unsettling. People lean in close, reading the last line, the unfinished sentence, and feel a chill crawl up their spine. Because it isn't just history, it's a voice cut off mid-thought, reaching out across time. And when you leave the museum and step into the Alaskan night, the silence follows you, heavy and endless, like the echo of a mind still whispering from deep underground. I still remember the sound of the wind at night, sharp, uneven, as if it carried voices through the valley. My name is Mark Delaney, and I shouldn't even be here to tell this story. 15 years ago, I went hunting near the old Jupiter mine outside On. It was late October, the season when the days shrink fast, when the air smells like frozen earth and everything feels on edge. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted caribou, maybe a quiet weekend away from the noise of town. But the trail took me past that mine, and for reasons I still can't explain, I set camp nearby. Locals had warned me, said the mine was bad ground, cursed even, but I didn't put much weight on superstition. That night changed me, because I saw something, heard something that still wakes me up in the middle of the night. And someone else, a fellow hunter named Aaron, never made it home. His disappearance is what people still whisper about, but I know what I heard. Aaron was younger than me, maybe 30, wiry, full of restless energy. We'd run into each other by chance on the ridge, both following tracks, both a little surprised to find company that deep in the backcountry. We decided to share a fire, two strangers in a lonely valley. He was the one who brought up the mine, pointing toward the dark outline on the slope. You know folks vanish around there, right? He asked with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He told me about the Jupiter crew miners from the 1920s who abandoned it suddenly, leaving equipment behind as if they'd fled in a hurry. Some say they heard things underground, whispers, knocking, called it quits and never looked back. I laughed, brushed it off. But Aaron kept glancing toward the slope as if expecting something to move in the dark. Later, when the fire died low, I swear I heard a faint metallic clang, distant but deliberate, like a hammer against stone. The next morning, Aaron wanted to see the shaft. I told him it was a bad idea, unstable ground, rotten beams, risk of collapse, but he waved me off. Won't be long. Just want to look. He was already moving uphill before I finished arguing. I followed reluctantly, rifle slung, boots crunching frost. The closer we got, the heavier the air felt, thick with the smell of rust and damp rock. The entrance loomed ahead, beams sagging, dark mouth swallowing the daylight. Aaron ducked inside, his voice echoing. You feel that? Like the ground's humming. I stood at the threshold, uneasy, The mine breathed cold air, steady, unnatural. I called for him to come back, but his reply faded, muffled, as if the earth itself was swallowing his words. Minutes passed, then silence. I stepped in, heart pounding, lantern cutting a weak circle of light. The shaft stretched ahead, water dripping from unseen cracks. No sign of Aaron, just footprints that ended 10 feet in, scuffed into nothing. Panic sharpened my senses. I shouted his name, voice cracking, the echo folding back in layers. Something about the way it bounced didn't sound right, like other voices overlapping mine. Too faint to decipher. My lantern flickered. I backed out fast, stumbling into the daylight, chest heaving. Maybe he'd slipped into a side tunnel. Maybe he'd gone deeper. But when I returned with 2 other hunters later that afternoon, the shaft was half collapsed. Fresh rockfall blocked the passage, as if the mountain itself had sealed it shut. We dug for hours, coughing in the dust, but the deeper we went, the less stable it became. Eventually we stopped, exhausted and shaken. No sign of Aaron, no pack, no rifle, nothing. Just gone. The authorities later called it an accident, said he must have been trapped in the collapse. But the thing that haunts me isn't the official report. It's what I heard when I pressed my ear to the stone that day. A faint tapping, rhythmic, like someone trying to answer back. Aaron's family never got closure. They pushed for more excavation, but the mine was declared too dangerous, sealed with concrete. I attended the meetings, stood in the back, feeling the weight of what I hadn't told them. I couldn't bring myself to say I'd heard tapping. What good would it do, except stretch their grief thinner? Years passed, but stories piled up. Hikers who camped near Jupiter claimed to hear voices at night, calling in tones too close to their own names. A trapper swore he saw a lantern light moving through the sealed entrance, steady and patient. Even now, some say if you stand near the hillside in silence, you'll feel a vibration underfoot, like distant machinery still running. The rational answer is always geology shifting stone, groundwater, echoes. That's what the experts say. But I know what I heard. And when the wind cuts across that valley, carrying sounds that don't belong, I remember Aaron's grin fading, his figure swallowed by shadow, and the tapping that still hasn't stopped. I've kept quiet for years, but silence gnaws at you. That valley is more than wilderness. It's a wound in the earth. Maybe Aaron was just unlucky. Maybe he stepped wrong, and the ground closed over him. But deep down, I don't believe it. I believe some places hold on to the living, the way others hold on to the dead. And Alaska? Alaska has more of those places than anyone wants to admit. The abandoned mines scattered across its spine aren't just relics of greed and failure. They're mouths that opened once for gold and now open for something else. I walked away from Jupiter Mine that night, but I've never felt like it let me go. Every time I close my eyes, I see that entrance breathing cold air, and I hear Aaron's voice fading, swallowed by something vast and patient. If you ever find yourself near Anne, and you hear knocking where no one should be, don't stay. Don't listen. Just walk away. Because some echoes aren't meant for the living. In early September 1999, Tom Harlan, 32, a seasoned wildlife researcher, packed his gear for a solo expedition into the Yukon Delta. His mission seemed simple: track caribou migration patterns, collect data, return safely. He waved to his colleagues at the base camp near the Kuskokwim River. "I'll be back before dark," he said, smiling confidently. "Don't wait up." Hours passed. The sun dipped behind distant ridges. Shadows stretched long across the wetlands. And then he didn't return. Search teams, friends, and fellow researchers immediately ventured out. Helicopters hummed overhead, slicing through thickening fog, while dogs sniffed every riverbank, trained for any trace. The terrain was merciless. Waterlogged marshes, twisted trees, shifting ground, but there was nothing. No footprints, no equipment, no sign of Tom. He had vanished completely, as if the land itself had swallowed him. Locals whispered about the moving fog, thick, clinging, disorienting, almost alive. Hunters avoided it. Pilots rerouted. Some said it calls to those who wander too far, and those who follow never return. Weeks passed, months. The official search was called off. Rumors lingered. A figure glimpsed in fog. Whispers at night. Faint, almost human. Almost familiar. Driven by curiosity and a need for answers. I decided to retrace Tom's last known steps. Equipped with a camera, a notebook, and an uneasy sense of purpose, I stepped into the fog-shrouded delta. The air was sharp, metallic, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Every snap of a branch beneath my boots made my heart jump. The silence was heavy, oppressive, like the land itself was watching. Then, partially buried under moss and mud, I found the notebook. It was Tom's, waterlogged, smeared with dirt, yet legible. The fog is calling. I must follow. Chills ran down my spine. I imagined him, alone, hesitant footsteps, drawn forward, lured deeper into the wilderness. He didn't leave by choice. The land took him. The second day, the fog thickened. Trees shifted subtly. Paths warped. Footprints appeared, human-shaped but elongated, distorted, leading to the river bend, then disappearing. By nightfall, I made camp near a small, abandoned hunting cabin. Inside, remnants of past disappearances, journals, tattered clothing, a boot, some notes desperate. I hear it calling, I can't stop. Others resigned. If you're reading this, don't come here. The wind shifted. Shadows danced on the cabin walls as the fire crackled. Then, faint, almost imperceptible, a whistle. A soft, rhythmic tone, like someone calling my name. Just beyond the trees, I froze. Breath shallow, no wind, no animals. Just that sound, patient, insistent, almost human, almost familiar. The next morning, I met Sarah, a park ranger from Nome. People think they can outsmart the tundra, the rivers. The wolves, she said, voice low, eyes narrowed, but the wilderness has rules, and it doesn't like being underestimated. She told me about a group of snowmobilers, vanished near the Kuskokwim River in 2003. They left markers, GPS beacons, walked in pairs, yet overnight, gone. Machines found days later, untouched, miles away, perfectly aligned. It's like the land itself moved them, she whispered. I felt my stomach tighten. The pattern was undeniable. Fog-heavy mornings, proximity to water, and an irresistible draw into the unknown. By the third day, my own disorientation began. Landmarks shifted. The river appeared farther west than it should have. Trees twisted in ways I didn't remember. And the fog, thickening, wrapping around me, muffling sounds, everything becoming unreal. My footsteps felt sluggish, as if the ground resisted. I stumbled upon a clearing with a gnarled tree at its center. Beneath it, a bundle of belongings, a jacket, a scarf, soaked, frozen. But no Tom. He had been here, and then, gone. I returned to the base camp to share what I'd found. The team was skeptical, labeling it coincidence. Yet, deep down I knew. The Yukon Delta had claimed another. Weeks later, a ranger stumbled upon something remarkable, partially buried in the thawing snow, miles from where Tom had vanished. Was a notebook, waterlogged but mostly legible. The fog. It waits at the river bend. I hear it calling, but I must follow. If anyone finds this, know that curiosity can be fatal. Next to it, a tattered scarf, frozen stiff. Nearby, faint footprints, human yet strangely distorted, leading into dense trees, and disappearing altogether. For the first time, there was physical evidence, something tangible. That suggested Tom had not simply vanished into thin air. Hints, breadcrumbs, that the land itself had been involved. Scientists, rangers, and locals debated. Some argued the relentless shifting delta. Others believed the fog had disoriented him. But the truth remained elusive. One thing was clear: the wilderness had chosen, and some of its secrets were finally, partially revealed. Even now, locals warn: venture near the Yukon Delta on foggy mornings, and you might hear it. A soft whistle calling your name, patient, waiting. Tempting curiosity beyond reason. Listen too closely, some say, and you'll follow too. Because Alaska's wilderness isn't merely wild. It's alive, watching, choosing, claiming those who wander too far. And perhaps some are still out there, walking, following, waiting. If this story gave you chills, make sure to subscribe. We'll explore more real disappearances and strange mysteries together. Stay safe and keep your eyes open.